guys and gals, Never here from Drake Wing Gaming, and something on Twitter, the Gaming Dragon. Today I'm coming back at you with a Let's Play episode of Arches. So yeah, let's go ahead and jump right back into it, shall we? Alarm chain, you were up and let's go. But doubt that had been real at all starts to creep in again, even though Cameron had convinced him at the time. So he continues to rest, waiting to see if his coyote comes to free him, and hopefully then he can finally get his claws on Brian. You've been standing there for a good 10 minutes. So, what'd you see? Well, I'm having trouble because they won't talk to me. Oh? Why's that? I think it's because you're here and they're scared of you. Maybe if you... Cameron screams, clawing and clutching at the huge fist on his ear. Brian twisting it viciously before lifting up so that Cameron's feet actually lift off the ground. He didn't know it was possible to feel that much pain from his ears, even though he knows they're sensitive. Stop! You sneaky Oh, yeah. I don't know if I want to say that. He violently shakes Cameron. The coyote twists his body, grabbing the bear's forearm and trying to get his legs lifted up and wrapped around bear's bicep to lessen the pressure, but Brian won't allow it. You know you said everything out loud just now? What? You know exactly what. Oh, God. Cameron is slammed up against the trunk of a tree, the impact resonating through his body. Instantly, Brian's huge, rugged muzzle is right next to his own, much smaller, narrow snout, the bear snorting heavily. Cameron fights as best he can, but his feet are off the ground again, and he kicks and twists, but the grip is more powerful than anything he's felt before. He can actually feel his eyes bulge and his tongue stick out involuntarily, and once again he finds himself drowning. In that moment, it isn't the crushing pressure on his neck or the horrid, rancid breath that's coming from the old bear that Cameron notices most. It's that Brian doesn't even seem angry. He doesn't even seem enraged that the coyote had been contacting Devon. He doesn't seem upset that Cameron broke his word to help the old bear with his demons. Instead, Brian looks excited, ecstatic, all while staring right into Cameron's face, watching the coyote's mouth open and close noiselessly. Vaguely, Cameron can sense a battle taking place inside Brian. He desperately wants to have his way with Cameron, but he also wants Cameron to exorcise the ghosts. But Cameron can also sense that Brian is realizing his plans were doomed from the start. How would he ever hide the fact that he killed a loving couple in this infamous abandoned town? He knows people will look for them, unlike his previous victims, except one. The police had already visited Echo looking for a missing student, and they already suspected Brian. It's all over. The bear is deciding that they're all going to die. This is the end, and he'll end it with one final victim. It doesn't fucking matter! Brian hisses in Cameron's face. Oh, shit. Something moves out of the corner of Cameron's eye, and he looks to see a somewhat familiar face. Its black, void-like features with swirling red eyes stare at him. It's watching him, too, like it's just as fascinated as Brian. Cameron senses very little intention or emotion from this creature, but he finally realizes that its purpose in this forest is simple. Record the terrible things that happen in it. Cameron is about to become one of its next recordings. The coyote's vision blurs and one paw drops to slip into Brian's pocket, disguising it as him trying to push the bear away. He feels and finds a single key he knew would be there. God damn it, you're a fucking cute one, you know? Brian's voice trembles with cruel, passionate emotion and nuzzles the coyote. He squeezes harder and Cameron's eyes roll up, all while putting the key in his own pocket. But he's not sure it matters. Brian already heard his plan. More importantly, though, is that Brian isn't letting up. As he fades into darkness, Cameron feels a part of himself die. The trip peaks, and suddenly Cameron is everything at once. He's a trailer home in the northwest. He's a desert lake. He's a broken road. He's a trailer home in the southwest. He's a train cutting through the wilderness. He's being shot in the head. He's being hung from a tree. He's being beaten to death. He's swimming under an arch. He's stumbling into a pond. He's in a space shuttle smashing into the ocean. He's a dead town. Dead, with working reflexes, using the tools that it still holds tightly in its grasp. Cameron disappears, and these thoughts and feelings are no longer his, because he isn't who he is. He is everything, and because of that, he can see everything. Pain pounds rhythmically in their head like a heavy drumbeat, making their ears pin back tightly before they begin to whine. And they croak as their sore throat protests against making the sound. They stare at the scene before them, and they blink. But it doesn't help them make sense of what's in front of them. In fact, it seems to make it worse. Who's making sense of what's that? of what that's in front of who. These intrusive thoughts about not existing. Who's having these thoughts? See? You're coming round. Fear rises up into his throat, something deep in his brain telling him that to flee that voice, to escape from it. But he's still too confused to figure out who or what he even is right now, because he still feels like nothing. But he's also still conscious enough to know that he is in fact something. He remembers that he's someone named Cameron. He remembers the situation, he remembers that he's been drugged with shrooms and Xanax. His trip has reached its dizzying peak, his sense of self so utterly decimated that he isn't sure how he's ever going to feel the same again. The terror and torture of the past 2 days has culminated to this, the moment that his mind gives in and breaks, and Cameron can't tell what's real and what isn't anymore. But there's something else, too. Despite the terrible loss of who he is, Cameron, this amalgamation he calls Cameron, is sensing something even more vividly than he had just had a few minutes ago, when he'd contacted Dev. Cameron sees what's ahead of him, but he's seeing so much more. In his mind's eye, he looks forward, and he sees a myriad of people in front of him, though they're all the same people. Devon, Brian, and himself locked in a vicious spinning blur of claws and teeth, blood and horrific unidentifiable viscera. It's confusing, seeing so many versions of himself and his boyfriend, and he turns his head to glance away, not wanting to see that violence. Then, noticing something over his shoulder, he looks back, and this time he sees one version of himself along with Brian. He sees his unconscious body being pinned against the tree for a while longer before he crumples to the ground. What the hell? His voice is low, husky, and barely audible. Brian laughs, starting the coyote out of his visions of violence. I choked you the fuck out, that's what. Cameron blinks at the bear, then back at the forest. I thought I died. Heh, not yet, kid. We got a few things to do first, and you probably want to see your boyfriend too, huh? Not sure you'll get to talk to him since he's knocked out. Knocked out? Yep. Wait, with what? Relax, it's just Rohypnol. Sure, I gave him a good amount, but they're a few decades old because they made them illegal in the States back in the 90s, and you know, when pills get old, they don't work so good anymore. Brian goes on and on about Rohypnol, and how it used to be the premier date rape drug in the country. Cameron watches the bear's mouth move in waves and ripples, yellow teeth poking out from behind his lips as saliva collects and becomes frothy at the corners. Who's watching this? Cameron reassures himself automatically. I'm watching this, and I need to save Devon. He's not so convinced by the first part, though. Me, Cameron. Simple concepts that aren't so simple anymore. Just like in high school, he stopped existing. It's different this time, though. The Xanax is certainly quashing the panic he should be feeling right now, but this time his perspective is from a completely different angle. Cameron's amalgamation does still exist, but the borders have dissolved, and he seems to be seeping into everything. Despite already knowing he's insignificant, he's still awestruck by how small Cameron is compared to the world. Even the bugs crawling beneath the leaves make Cameron feel small. An entire world he knows nothing about. But entangling his identity with the universe means he's also entangled with Brian. The bear is missing parts of himself, kind of like Artie, shattered pieces and jagged holes pockmarking the landscape of his life. Cameron almost feels sorry for him, that maybe if things had been just a little different, the odds just a little more in Brian's favor, he could have been a very different person. Huh. What's really disturbing, though, is the genuine affection he has for Cameron. His urge to caress and hold the coyote, but there's a hatred there, too. A disgust for what Cameron is. Young, attractive, and a fag. Not just queer like Brian considers himself to be, but a faggot. The kind of queer that acts real cute before fucking over the real men who should be doing all the fucking. So it feels good to punish Cameron, but it's even better to watch him suffer. To watch the way his body writhes, his mouth open for air, his eyes wide and fearful. Cameron feels himself recoil from understanding Brian's thought process, a way of thinking he'd never consider himself. But that thought process is what makes Brian the terrible person that he is. Cameron knows that most don't have a say in how their sexual interests and fetishes develop, so the thoughts themselves aren't exactly evil, at least not to Cameron. Cameron knew a few guys from college who had interests similar to Brian. During his first year of dating Devon, the bear had timidly asked him if he could gently close his teeth over the coyote's neck and growl. It was thrilling and intense, and Cameron loved the rush. Then Devon had a nightmare about tearing out Cameron's throat, and that was the end of that. So to Cameron, Brian isn't all that strange. What makes Brian different isn't that he has fetishes. He's not crazy. He's not a psychopath. Not the true root of the true root of Brian's evil is clear. He's selfish, and he's never satisfied with what he gets. Selfish enough to put dozens of young people through the hellish torture until they finally die. All while having the capacity to fully control himself. All while having full access to alternatives like roleplay. But it's not enough for Brian. He always needs more. All for his own fleeting, drug-fueled sexual gratification because at one point, Brian decided that's what makes him feel good, so fuck this world that makes him feel bad. But he found some release in strangling Cameron, and now his focus is turning back to the vague idea on how to use Cameron's abilities. Something to stop him from spending the rest of eternity with his victims torturing him. Cameron could spoil the ending for Brian. Let him know that when everyone dies, they just cease to be what they were. That's it. Ghosts, demons, poltergeists, creations of the living, and whatever it is that's an echo. Cameron draws back at this point, getting overwhelmed by all the thoughts coming from the old bear, unable to understand them without more context. Looking forward, he glimpses the various scenarios again, and the one constant is death. Most involve him dying, and a good amount involve Devon dying as well. Cameron imagines that this is indicative of what's most likely to happen. But a few, just two, in fact, show Cameron and Devon surviving. With Brian either living or dying. Cameron doesn't care much about the latter, just as long as he can get Devon and himself out of Echo. They can deal with Brian afterwards. Cameron doesn't even care much if he doesn't make it, especially in this state of mind, but he won't accept not being able to save Devon. Suddenly remembering what he had done earlier, Cameron tries to suddenly brush his pocket, and is amazed that the key is still there. Does Brian know? Well, he does know what Cameron had planned, but in his own excitement, and especially because he's tweaked out, he's hyper-focused on other things. He'd also missed the key being taken out of his pocket. That, and Brian's memory, is terrible. Decades of drugs at neurotoxic doses had dismantled who he used to be. He doesn't even seem to remember why he choked Cameron in the first place. He had to make connections down in Sonora. Stuff was over the fucking counter there, so it was easy to get. But getting it over the fucking border is a whole different issue. Alright, y'all, I'm actually gonna pause it right there. Thank y'all so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, ring that notification bell, and check out our Patreon if you can. It always helps. Thank all of our lovely patrons so much for all they do for the channel. We greatly appreciate y'all. Anyway, I love you all, and I'll see y'all in the next video. Bye-bye!